Guys, welcome the most famous cut man in the world, Stitch Duran, to our interview here tonight. And I think, Stitch, the perfect thing to get started with is, your history and how you got started in being a cut man. And, I really enjoy that story. And I think it's something that, will really help people get to know you right off the bat.
Well, I appreciate it. And thanks, Nick, for having me on board. And, all you guys that are home patiently trying to train and trying to keep the mind strong, just keep going at it. Remember, always go that one more round, right? But yeah, I've had a great career. Got a great story, actually, and Nick, you read my book. I wrote a book called From the Fields to the Garden, being that I grew up as a farm worker in the Central Valley of California. And I always tell people, for the fruits and vegetables, if you ate them, I'd probably pick them for you. So those were the fields, and my goal was to make it to the garden, which is Madison Square Garden. And I've been there. But the book kind of details everything from when I started to the point where I am now. And how I ended up being a cut man is when I was in the Air Force in 1974. A lot of you guys weren't even born. Probably your parents weren't even born at that time. But they stationed me in Thailand, and not even knowing what Thailand was, but I wanted to study the martial arts. And I got there and I saw my first Muay Thai fight, and I started training. And from there, when I got back to the States, I was there for a year and literally ate, slept, and dreamt martial arts. And when I got back to the States, I got into boxing to improve my hands. From there, I started training amateur boxers. And then I opened up my own school of kickboxing, which was called ASK, the American School of Kickboxing. And that's how I learned to be a cut man. I was a trainer, and I managed the fighters. I promoted fights, but I like wrapping hands and I like working cuts. And I made the move to Las Vegas 26 years ago, just to follow my dreams and be a cut man in boxing. And then the UFC came on board and they brought me in. And from there, I've worked the bare knuckle fights and just about every combat sport out there. So, if you guys got questions, I have some good answers for you.
Just before we get to everybody else's questions, I get to be selfish, ask the questions I want to.
You're the boss.
What was it like in Tyson Fury's camp and being in his corner? Because I know, you're not just a cut man. You just don't show up on the night of the fights and that's it. I know you go to the camp, you wrap the guy's hand several times before. How does it feel? You get them training with it on, so what can you tell us about Tyson Fury, and what was it like to be a part of his camp?
Unbelievable, Nick. I've been blessed to work in so many high profile fights around the world. And, to that point, the highlight of my fights, and I've had many, was the last fight when Vladimir Klitschko fought Anthony Joshua. And Klitschko was a world champion for 10 years. I'd been with him for 12 years, and he ended up losing his world title, but it was a tremendous Rocky Balboa type of fight. And then Tyson Fury had fought Vladimir Klitschko a couple fights before, and he beat him. And I thought Vladimir just had a bad day, but Tyson Fury was very unorthodox in his style. But anyway, going into me meeting him, one of the fights prior, going back, he fought Deontay Wilder for the world title. And as we all know, he got dropped twice. And one time where he shouldn't have got up, he got knocked out, and he got up like the Walking Dead. Ended up with a draw. And so he had a couple of tune-up fights leading up to the rematch with Deontay Wilder. But on this last fight, he ended up with a big old giant cut right on the eyebrow. I mean, it's probably about that big and probably about as deep as the width of my finger, right? So it was a big old cut there, and then he had another one underneath there. While the cut man that worked on him, Jorge Capetillo, is a good friend of mine, but he was a novice. And that's why it's so important for you to know where you're at the level that you're at before, you start making commitments. But he did a good enough job to keep him in the fight, and Tyson Fury won the fight. But now come to the rematch with Deontay Wilder, they didn't want to take those kind of chances anymore. So Bob Arum, the promoter, Tyson Fury, obviously the fighter, and even Jorge Capetillo all suggested for them to bring me in because of my experience. So, yeah, you're right, Nick. I got to the gym and a couple of weeks before the fight, and as soon as I walk into the gym, Tyson Fury, keep in mind he's 6'9", 270, 80 pounds, puts his hand out and says, "Hey, welcome to the team." And then right off the bat, we start talking about the cuts, and he shows me the cuts, and, we go over the program of what I'm going to do, and don't worry about nothing. And, psychology is such an important thing because even though these guys are gladiators, deep inside, and all you guys are, deep inside, all you guys are babies. So you need somebody that is going to be there to take care of you. So we talked about that, and then we talked about my sponsorship. I have sponsors that I work with that, of course, the reason why the UFC let me go was because I spoke out about the Reebok deal where they took away the sponsors from the fighters and even the cutmen. But nonetheless, I told Tyson Fury that I just teamed up with Mark Zucker, which is the owner of One More Round, the apparel company that used to be my sponsor, and we teamed up again. So I talked to Tyson Fury about me creating my own cornerman jacket with my sponsors on them. And once again, Tyson Fury puts his hand on my shoulder and he says, "Stitch, you can do whatever you want." And from there, man, we kicked it off, and the training was fun. He was very, very dedicated. The fight itself was crazy. I think I did like 40 interviews the week of the fight, and I think maybe another 15, 20 the week after the fight. And everybody was talking about the cut and how I got involved with Tyson Fury. And then after the fight, what kind of experience was it working with Tyson Fury? But what a good guy. The whole team were good. And I always say I've worked with so many great fighters that it's not so much about skills anymore because everybody could fight. It's about how you treat people and what kind of person you are. Those are the kind of people I like working with. And just to get into that bond where I know that you're going to battle and I'm going to go to battle and I'm going to be covering your back also. And like I told him, my job is to give you that one more round. So, yeah, working with Tyson Fury, Nick, was a blessing in disguise. And till this day, I thought I have a lot of great moments, and we'll talk about some. But this one kind of falls up on top.
My next one, and I asked you this. I think the last time you were in Canada, and when you were doing the hand taping seminar for us and the cut seminar. Can you tell us about one or two of maybe MMA matches that had some of the craziest cuts you ever had to deal with?
Yeah, there's been quite a few of them. I think in MMA when I was with the UFC, a good one was Forrest Griffin when he fought Stephan Bonnar. If we all remember, if you go back to the original days of UFC number 2, and that's when Dana bought them, they had the reality shows, and Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonnar were the finalists. And I happened to work the corner of Forrest Griffin. And that was the fight that they said made the UFC, took the UFC across and made them, start making them the name that they are now. But the fight was tremendous to the point where Dana gave both the guys a bonus, $100,000 bonuses, and signed them up both to fight in the UFC. But working with Forrest, he had blood. They both had blood. So I'm cleaning up and all that, and I'm standing next to his coaches, and they're ready to make the ring announcement. And one of his coaches looks at me and he says, "Stitch, I'm not gay, but I got to give you a kiss, man, because you did a great job." And he kissed me right in the cheek, So, those are the moments that are tremendous. And then to follow up with that, because I've always worked with Forrest. Every time he fought, I was the guy that wrapped his hands. But he fought Shogun. And I think it's in the second video game. They're on the cover of the second video game. But it was the first UFC fighter fighting a Pride fighter, which was Shogun. And they were in a battle, but I think in the second round, Forrest ends up with a big old cut right here, what we call lightning bolt cut. because it goes one way and then it goes the other. So basically, it's a big, big cut. And I pulled all the stuff that I had and I put it on him. And he ended up winning the fight. And then, about a week later, I get a nice thank you card from him with a gift certificate to a very nice restaurant. But like I'm saying, Nick, these are the moments that I live for, working with guys like Forrest and Tyson Fury and the Klitschko's and, all these MMA guys. So that's what my job is. It's not even a job. It's more an adventure.
Yeah, nice. My partner in the gym, Mark Holst, he has a question. Mark, do you wanna ask your question here, Mark?
Yes. Well, first, thank you so much, Stitch, for being on here.
Of course.
My question is about mostly of the recent fight with when Cowboy got popped in the nose, and then he blew out his nose, and then his eyes swelled up. As the fight, I've done that after the fight, but not during the fight. So my question is that it's kind of like a double question. Is like, what do you tell the guys like when they? I assume that I don't know the science behind it, but
right.
Like when you get popped in the nose, like how do you tell the guys not to blow out from the nose because it might be instinct? And then what do you do in the corner to stop that swelling to go in the eyes?
That's a good question, Mark. And, and you're right. But as soon as, and nosebleeds are a pain, they're hard to work. You can maintain them, but, they always look good if, they look bad when the blood continues to come down. But what I normally do first and foremost is I'll put a cotton swab in there and I'll clean out all that blood, right? Then I'll put a swab in there with adrenaline chloride, 1/1000. That's the medication we use, which is a vasoconstrictor. So you put it into the nose, and in theory, it closes up the blood vessels. But as I'm doing that, then of course I'm talking to the fighter, and I said, whatever you do, don't blow your nose. All right. So what I'll do is right at the end, I'll just kind of clean out as much of it so that he doesn't have to worry about just blowing it out. And you're right. A lot of times it's an instinct, and then you just try to, keep it in his mind, don't blow your nose and don't blow your nose. And yeah, you were talking about Cerrone doing that, but I remember, I think it was Machida or Shogun, one of those two, at the end of the fight, you saw him on the camera go like this and blow his nose, and you saw his eye literally just go boom. But what happens is when you get that type of damage, Mark, all the membranes inside the tissue are busted. So as you blow your nose, you'll make, those are little air pockets. You'll create an air pocket, and that air goes in there, and that's why you see it go like that. So outside of closing the eye, I mean, it's not dangerous unless it closes the eye and you can't see, and then you take that shot that you don't want. That was a good question.
Thank you so much, Stitch. As a fighter, I don't want to research why I do that. I just was always on my nose, but I never even knew why. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Hey, all right. Hey, when next time he does that, just hit him behind the head. He'll learn.
Mark, is that both your questions or?
Yeah, that was it.
All right. Okay. So Stitch, from the board here, I'm checking. Do you have a favorite fight in your mind that you've cornered, whether from like personal reasons or whatnot? Do you have one that sticks out in your mind, or one or two of them?
Yeah, I'll give you. Yeah, I have tons of them, and but I'll give you one for MMA, and then I'll give you one for boxing, right? And like I told you, Nick, and all the listeners there, for me, it's the heart and soul that the fighter gives me that makes it so special in the job that I have. But the fight with Wanderlei Silva when he fought Chuck Liddell, the fight was December the 29th, and it was at the MGM. And about a week before, I had seen Wanderlei, and one of my things is to reinforce confidence in these guys, whether I'm working their corner or not. But just I love these guys, and I know they're gladiators, and we all try to pump them up with positive messages and what have you not. But I told Wanderlei, I said, look, Wanderlei, the 29th is my birthday. I'm going to give you some good karma, man. Go out there and win the fight, right? So come fight time, I'm working the other corner. I'm working with Chuck Liddell. Leon Tabbs is working with Wanderlei Silva. And this has to be probably one of my top 3 fights ever, because these guys are literally just cracking each other. I mean, you could hear the punches hitting each other. And, you know, Vandalay swollen and Chuck is cut, and you know, the bell rings for the end of the fight, and I clean up Chuck, and then I go to the other corner where Vandalay is, and I'm checking up on him, and like I say, he's all swollen, and Leon Tabs, the cut man's working on him, and I put my hand on him. I said, Vandalay, I said, how do you feel? And he says, no, I'm okay, Stitch, I'm okay. And then he says, a happy Stitch? He says, Stitch, happy birthday. Now, this guy was just in the most craziest fight of his whole life, and in the middle of the ring in front of all these people, he wishes me a happy birthday. And I thought, to me, that was such a special moment. And well, with Vladimir Klitschko, I worked with him for 12 years, was the world champ for 10 years. The fight with Anthony Joshua, which was my favorite fight up till the Tyson Fury fight. Well, I didn't see Vladimir till Friday because my daughter Carla had gotten married in the island of Crete. So I didn't get to London until Thursday night, and I didn't see Vladimir until Friday because he was staying in an apartment and we were staying at the hotel right across the street from Wembley Stadium. So I'm in the dressing room and I'm talking to Vladimir, and he knows, you know, that I've been with him many years, that I don't say a lot, but whenever I say something, there's a lot of truth to it. So I'm trying to find out how he's feeling and all that. And once again, you know, at the end, I put my hand on him and, you know, I said, Vladimir, you know, don't worry about nothing. I'm going to take care of you like you're my son. And I leave, right? And I did that for a purpose. But here we are in the fight, right before Michael Buffer does the announcements. There's 90,000 people in the arena, millions of people around the world. I'm putting the final Vaseline on Vladimir. Our faces are probably maybe this far apart. And of course, he's like 6'6", 6'8". And I'm putting the Vaseline on him. At that point, he looks at me and says, Stitch, you could call me son. And at that point, it gave me chills because I knew I had gotten into him. You know, Nick, you guys are fighters. Mark, you're a fighter. Some of the guys that are listening, you guys are fighters. You know how nervous you guys are the night before the fight. And everything is going through your head. And you need that one moment of serenity knowing that you're going to be okay. Well, that moment must have been the moment that Vladimir Klitschko thought, you know what, I'm going to go get everything I have because Stitch's going to take care of me. So, yeah, those two are two of my many, many favorite stories. But, yeah, I love them.
That's awesome.
It's crazy, huh?
I remember you telling the Klitschko one before, and got me this time just like it did the first time.
It gets me all the time too, Nick. Yeah.
I have a.
And you know what? Hey, let me add to that now, because you know, probably 2-3 years later, after Vladimir retired, maybe the last 6 months ago, I was working a show in Germany, and Vladimir happened to be there, so we got together, and he was leaving, and I stopped him right before he got to his car. I said, Vladimir, I need to know what was going through your mind during that moment when you said you could call me son. Because I thought it was important for me to know that. It's between him and I. And he said, you know, Stitch, there's some people that I have a high respect for. And that whatever they do or whatever they say, I know it's for the best interest of me or whoever he's doing it. You're that kind of person. And when you told me that, I felt that I had to tell you that, you know, I am your son. So to me, I thought that was pretty special.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. I have a question here. Like, how do organizations go about picking cut men? Is one of the questions.
Well, you know, when I was with the UFC, Leon Tabs was the first and original cut man from UFC #1. So he is the godfather of cut men. Passed away now. We ended up being good friends. But when Dana and Lorenzo and Frank bought the UFC, they brought me on board to be a cut man because MMA was such a new sport that guys don't know how to wrap hands, or guys didn't know how to wrap hands, guys didn't know how to work cuts. So Leon Tabs would be on one side and I would be on the other. Then the fighters started asking us to wrap their hands. And, you know, when you got 12 fights in one card, 24 fighters, you can't wrap everybody's hands. So Dana White brought in Don House, the third cut man. And eventually they ended up using 5 cut men at the same time. But How are they chosen? Through experience, or recommendations. There's guys that I've recommended in the UFC that are working now, Micah Afanasiev, and there's just, a bunch of other guys, Rob Monroe. These guys, they're all working. You got Scotty, you got all these guys that are coming in that work in their regional areas whenever the UFC is there. So, yeah, that's how it's done. A lot of it just, they want guys with experience. And I've always said that, in boxing, I would always recommend a cutman that has worked MMA and boxing opposed to a cutman that has only worked boxing, because in MMA, we work cuts all the time.
Yeah. Just a side question, actually, from myself, because I know you're working the bare knuckle championships.
Yes.
So how busy are you during those matches?
About 70% cut ratio for me, 60, 70%. They're going to happen, but I tell you what, it's a great sport. When I first joined them, I joined for the purpose of seeing, when I went to their first show, to seeing how they were going to take care of the fighters on safety-wise. And Dave Feldman and the whole team that are the bare knuckle fighters and the staff, safety is paramount. The cuts that they get, it's what they call short-term cuts, which, you could sew up, maybe a broken hand, as opposed to the long-term damage, which is the dementia pugilistica. But, the cut ratio is pretty high.
Yeah. Okay, another question.
Guaranteed work. Yeah.
Guaranteed work, yeah. Do you take a different approach with a fighter who cuts easy? And the example that was put out is like Nate Diaz, for example.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good story. Yeah, Nate, you could hit Nate here and he gets cut here, right? But what I do now, Nick, just through my experience factor, is I always prepare for the worst case scenario, whether you get cut a lot or whether you don't, because I've worked on guys where they said, you don't have to worry about me, I never get cut. Well, I still work with these guys because they end up getting cut, right? So no, what I do is I just prepare and always prepare for the worst case scenario. But that's a good question and a follow-up to that, because if a fighter is taking a lot of shots, just say ground and pound, I'm definitely getting my stuff ready, because once a bell rings, every second that you get to that fighter, that you save getting to that fighter, it's going to be the seconds that you're going to be able to apply the medication and take care of him. So you got to be right on it.
All right. Next question was, what was one of the most brutal knockouts that you can recall in your history?
I've had, it was funny because, Scott, what was the guy's name? Tony Martin, fought a guy from Arizona, and he got kicked right here, and he got knocked out to the point where he was snoring. And what happened is his whole body just locks up. And that leads me to Crow Cop when he fought Gabriel Gonzaga. Same thing with Crow Cop. Great kickboxer, great fighter. But he ended up getting cracked right in the head, and he got knocked out to the point where he snored. He's like this, stiff, and he's going, and we get to him, and the doctor wants to pull the mouthpiece out right off the bat. And I said, no. And working with so many doctors and the experience factor, I tell the doctor, no, leave the mouthpiece in, because number one is he's locked up. And what happens is, let's say your brain is a computer, you basically get a download, right? Or whatever it's called, it crashes. So he's locked up, and you leave that mouthpiece in there, number one, so he don't bite his tongue or anything like that. But as long as he's still breathing, you leave it in there. So as soon as, he starts rebooting, then he starts relaxing. But that was a cold knockout that Crow Cop got.
Yeah, I remember his leg bent backwards.
Yeah, and his leg went backward. You would have thought it was broken.
Yes, yeah. I actually, they featured that fight just recently because I think it was like a 7-year anniversary or however long ago. Next one, you kind of touched on it earlier with the Forrest Griffin fight, but the worst injury you had to fix during a fight. I guess you kind of answered that already during the Forrest Griffin fight.
The worst case scenario for me, where I'll give you a couple of instances, and these are the ones that I hate to see, right? But they do happen, and it's a contact sport, and but when Anderson Silva fought Chael Sonnen, the second fight, well, the first fight he got knocked out, right, which was kind of surprising. But the second one, an hour before, I'm wrapping his hands, and we're talking, and he's telling me that he's going to send me some a pair of his sweats, and I'm thanking him, and he called me Papi, so we have a good relationship. But he's fighting Chael Sonnen, and I'm getting my stuff down in my bucket like this. I'm not looking at the fights, but I hear a sound that sounds like a broken branch. And I look up and I see Anderson Silva had broken his leg. And I jumped up there real quick. What do? Instincts, I get a thing of ice pack. And I get into the ring and I'm looking at him and he's in pain and all that. And the doctor's working on him. And I'm thinking, my ice pack is not going to do anything for me. But just to see him with a broken leg and the relationship I had with Anderson Silva, it really bummed me out. And, normally when I go home after a fight, my adrenaline's kicking in, 2-3 hours after the fight. I'm still amped up a little bit, but this one just prolonged even worse. But beyond that, what was even worse than that one was Corey Hill when he fought Dale Hart. I think we were in one of the military bases years ago, early UFC. And Corey throws a kick, and once again, his leg breaks. And he's down on the canvas. And I rush up to him, and I get down on my knees, and I get his shoulders like this. He's facing up, and his head is literally right here, and I'm holding on to him. And like I say, I'm down on my knees. And I'm looking at his leg, and his leg is going this way, and his foot is going this way. And it just freaked me out, man. And he's in pain, and he's saying, Stitch, what happened? What happened? And I'm like, I'm holding him like this, man. And I said, you know what? You broke your leg, man. Go ahead and scream as much as you want, because I knew he was in pain. And then the doctor's there, and he's telling me, pull on his shoulders. So as I pull on his legs, you're trying to kind of, I guess, straighten it out. And he's going through so much pain. And finally, they're bringing the gurney in to wheel him out, and they shoot him up with a couple shots of morphine, and they get him up onto the stretcher to take him out. And the heart of the warrior that Corey has is, he looked at me and said, Stitch, he said, Stitch, I almost had him. And I'm thinking, wow, man, this guy just broke his leg, and he did. He almost had Dale Hart, and I ran into Dale years later, and, it bummed him out just the way it did me. Corey did fight again, but he ended up passing up. He had some kind of illness or something like that, and he ended up passing. But that's the worst case scenario of anybody. You don't want to wish out on anybody, but,
Yeah. Ironically, it's kind of funny you bring up Corey Hill, because Mark, my partner who asked you the question earlier,
right?
Mark fought Corey Hill after he recovered in another league, and that was the fight that got Mark into the UFC, winning that fight. So
all right, yeah. So see, it's a small circle, man. So Mark, I know you would understand. You fought a guy, and then for him to pass out or pass away, it's it's something that's within your memories. But yeah. So those are sad stories, but I've worked with a lot of guys that got knocked out. Or just it's heartbreaking for sometimes. But in the same token, now, God, what was his name? I'll think of his name. We'll continue. Go ahead.
There was another question from one of the people here. What are some of the typical things that you have on hand, as a cutman?
Oh, good question, man. Yeah. So here's how we answer. And you know what? Every day or the night before a fight, I always pull everything out, and I'll double check and triple check and make sure that I always have everything. And like I said earlier, I always prepare for the worst case scenario, right? So first and foremost, I go to Target. I don't know if you guys have Targets in Canada, but it's a department store. It's a store. But you get these buckets for household cleaning and all that, and that's where I put my stuff. But some of the stuff with the medications. Let's start off with the medications. The medications that are for the most part authorized are the adrenaline chloride 1000. That is epinephrine, what they call a vessel constrictor. So that's what we have on the swab. You put on the swab on the cut, and in theory, what it does is it closes up the blood vessels. There's another patch that I use. It's like this. You put it on the cut and it dehydrates the blood. It's called Quick Aid. So those are the two primary ones that we use. My KO swell, which is the metal part that we use. The Stitch Premium one, I created one. That goes in the ice bucket, keeps cold. And what you do with that one, to prevent swelling or minimize swelling, you just cold direct pressure. What you're doing there is, once again, you're trying to close up those blood vessels, right? Ice pack, you always need an ice pack because ice pack works wonders. Personally, I like to use just the sandwich bags because those rubber ones that you see all the time, those are horrible. The cold doesn't penetrate and doesn't get onto the surface of a fighter. But a plastic, simple sandwich bag works wonders. I always have towels, little towels that I have like this that I'll keep wet. And that's what I use to clean the cut, clean the blood all over the body and what have you not. Of course, the Vaseline. So those are the primary things that we have. I always carry water. Number one, just, get the towels wet, but also to drink when you're out there working the fights. So, but that's a good question. And you know what, man, some of your students and the people that are tuning in are asking some very, very good questions, Nick. You should be proud of yourself.
We have, this question might be a bit too personal, but they're kind of asking how does the pay work, or is there do you also get a win bonus, sometimes from either a fighter that's coaching you or sorry, a fighter rather you're cornering type of thing? What has been your experience with that?
Yeah, well, no, I can answer that. Of course, I'm not going to tell you how much I make, but I'll tell you how it works. In the MMA industry, obviously the bare knuckle fights, kickboxing and all that, if they bring in cutmen, the promoter will usually pay for us, and it's one fee to work with all the fighters, right? Boxing on a different token, you're working for the fighter themselves, and at that point, you negotiate a fee. Usually for the round figures, if it's 2% or whatever, whatever is more, but you get a lot of these guys that are, $4, $5, $6, $7, $8 million fights, then you work on a base, right? And but no, that's pretty much the way it is. Bonuses, yeah, like say Forrest, gave me a bonus, and some guys, when you go beyond I have gotten bonuses, and I've gotten dinners and just additional monies and thank yous, and so that comes with it. But I always tell people, not everybody is at my level, Nick, and I always tell people in anything that we do, if you do it for the money, you're doing it for the wrong reasons, because not every cut man can say that they could do this on a full-time basis. And I've been blessed, to say I could do this full-time, but it's only been like that for the last 10 years. I always had a job.
Yeah, I forget. If you can refresh my memory, I forget what you did for work before.
Yeah, people think I'm just a cut man, right? But I have a lot of sales and marketing experience because I work for RJ Reynolds Tobacco Company. They're the manufacturers of Winston, Salem's, Camel cigarettes. So I was in sales and marketing with them for 23 years. So that led me to believe that taught me to learn how to read contracts, how to sell, how to merchandise, everything that I need to do to be an entrepreneur myself. So, say hitting up sponsors, this type of stuff, that experience that I had, because people always ask me, do you have an agent? Do you have an attorney? I said, no, I do everything myself. I do have an attorney that will proofread some of the, the higher end agreements and contracts that I get. But for the most part, the basic contracts, those I can handle myself.
Nice. We have a happy early birthday. And, one of the people here, they want to say happy early birthday. And they wanted to ask if you had any medical training. Because even the way you just speak about the nose and the eye closing up, how did you learn some of these things, about the game? Or is it all just hands-on experience, firsthand experience?
Yeah, it's all of the above. Yeah, you're right. No, I only have a high school diploma, but it's not because I couldn't qualify to go to college. I did walk on to Merced College for a little bit. It's just that financially I couldn't afford to go to school. But I walked on to Merced College to play baseball, American baseball. And my goal was always to become a professional baseball player. I used to play third base. So my little town to the college, Merced College, was 9 miles away. So I would go to school with my friends, being I didn't have a car. And after school, when they would finish school, they would go home, and I'd stay and I'd practice, and then I would have to hitchhike back home. Well, I was naive. I didn't know about grants and scholarships and talking to the coach or the teachers and all that. So I joined the military, and that changed my whole life. But yeah, that's how things got going.
Yeah, I was going to say military, but I didn't know if I remember correctly if it was military.
Yeah. But the military is one that helped me out big time. But no, just, I worked side by side with a lot of the ringside doctors here in Nevada, the best doctors. A lot of them work emergency units, and they're not scared of blood, and they're not scared of. So I learned a lot of that. You're talking about the nose, about the membrane, but a lot of it through example, just experience, I should say, Nick. It's just common sense. When you damage the tissue here, you are going to have some air pockets, and you blow your nose like Mark. The air has to go somewhere. So, and even taking the mouthpiece out. You see a lot of guys right off the bat, they want to take the mouthpiece out, but like the doctors say, leave the mouthpiece in as long as he is breathing. Leave it in, because there's that always chance of just biting your tongue through excitement and all that. Leave it in, and then take it out when you can.
Now, the next question was, I'm going to kind of reword it. It's asking about, have you ever, obviously your job is to keep the guy in it, keep the guy fighting, not to tell the doctor to call the fight. But has there ever been a time where you're fixing a cut and the doctor's like, and you're like, listen, man, I got this, I got this fixed. Give him the round.
One more round.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Of course. That's what kind of puts me up there on top is, I've given so many fighters that one more round, but there was one, Stefan Struve fought Chris, God, I can't remember those names, years back, right? But Stefan Struve's lip was just shredded to the point, it looked like a shark just bit it, and it was ugly, right? So the doctor, they called timeout during the recess. The doctor comes in, and he's looking at his lip, and I could just see it in him that he's thinking about stopping the fight. And Stefan wants to continue. You can see it in his eyes that he's okay. He wants to continue. But when you look at that, even though it looks bad, it's not in a position where it's going to give a fighter a disadvantage. And whenever you stop a fight, it's because the fighter is at a disadvantage. So I'm looking at it, and I'm working on the cut, and I tell the doctor, I said, look, doctor, he's okay. I said, if you got a good plastic surgeon, he's going to be okay. And the guys in the truck that were recording it all heard it, and they all started laughing. He let Stefan go out there and continue fighting, and he ended up winning the fight. So, excuse me.
Wow. I remember that fight. Stefan Struve is that giant tall guy.
Yeah, he was like 6'7", 6'8". Good guy from Holland.
A question from one of the girls, young girl fighter here. Have you ever stitched up a female fighter? And who's the youngest person you've ever had to stitch up?
Well, my nickname is Stitch, but I don't stitch people up. All right, but I do work on them. And leading up to your question, yeah, I've worked with a lot of girls. And when I first started working the Invicta fights, which is in fact, they're just going through their 8th anniversary yesterday. Shannon Knapp done a great job with Invicta, which is all girl fights. And a lot of those go into the UFC. So, when I first started working with them, I wasn't too familiar with girl fights, but I became an instant fan because these girls, their fights are more exciting than the guys. And I've worked many fights with a lot of girls, of course. So can't wait till you get on board. As a matter of fact, this one girl just sent me a picture the other day or a message, and she says, they call me the Stitch because she says, you worked my first fight when I fought in Bakersfield, California, and I got cut, and they sewed it up, and I guess they started calling her the Stitch. And so she sent me a message on that, and I said, well, okay. You know, if people ask me if I'm the Stitch, I'm going to say, no, it's Susie Howard. She is the Stitch. You know, so, yeah, I don't sew them up. I just stopped her bleeding.
Okay, so here, I think this is a boxing question. Where does the roll of coins cheating trick come from? Have you ever heard about coaches putting something illegal in a fighter's hand wrap or tape?
Yeah, the coins, I think that's just, I think maybe that was just from the old street fights, you know, where you put a roll of coins in your, you know, you put a roll of coins in your hand, it just kind of gives you more of a nice solid base. But yeah, so I think that's more of a myth. What was the other question? I'm sorry.
The other question was, you know, have you heard or ever seen of coaches putting something illegal in a fighter's hand wraps, tape, gloves?
Yeah, you know, to me, it's quite irritating when guys try to cheat. There was a big fight with Miguel Cotto fought Margarito. And Margarito's coach, from what I understand, reached into his bag and pulled out the padding that goes on the knuckles. Because in boxing, you wrap the hand the same way as you do for MMA, except that we put more padding on the knuckles. Well, he reached in his bag and he put the padding, and it found out that there was some substance that he had in there that when it got wet and moist, that it would harden up a little bit. And they ended up kicking him out of sports forever. But there's also guys, you know, they'll try to put tape here and all that. And, you know, I think it's unfair. And it's just because guys don't know how to, you know, they're not top of the line people.
Question here. You've seen many different cornermen over the years. Can you give some examples of cornermen making positive and or negative impact on fights?
Yeah, there's I've seen a lot of good corners and I've seen a lot of bad corners. You know, and the thing about it, my kids have literally have grown up in the gym. You know, when I had my school of kickboxing, but they also know the work that I do, and they're always studying. I always study corners, whether it's a 4-round fight, whether it's a championship fight. I'm always looking at the corners, and there's so many guys that do a lot of things bad. And in boxing, you don't see it so much in MMA, and I'll tell you why. But in boxing, you see a lot of guys with the swabs that go in the cut. They'll put them in their mouth, or they'll put them in their ear. They don't have gloves. The technique that they use is totally wrong. So I've seen that. In MMA, I have to take a lot of pride in helping structure the program that a lot of MMA cut men use. We all wear gloves. We all have the wrist wraps that I have. They're available at cutmanforhiresupplies.com. It's where you put your swabs. So you don't put your swabs here. You don't put them there. You put them there, and you just grab them and put them on the cut. So you got your gloves. You have your wrist wrap. You got clean towels, you know, and you know, you follow the techniques that we put together. So I've seen a lot of good ones, and I've seen a lot of bad ones.
Okay, next question here. Okay. Somebody wanted to know if you were a professional baseball player, what team would you play for?
Well, that's a good question. It probably would have been the Los Angeles Dodgers. You know, that was a time when, you know, just the Dodgers were my team at that time.
And, you know, I think you touched on this a bit earlier, but they're asking, why did you become a cut man? Like, what gave you your break into that? How did you kind of fall into that and continue with that?
Ooh, good questions, man. I like that. Well, here's how I ended up being a cut man is I had my own school of kickboxing, right? And so during that, well, rewind a little bit. When I got out of the military, I lived in Oakland, California. And there I started training in boxing to improve my hands to go with, you know, everything else. And at that time, I started working with amateur boxers. And that's when I learned how to wrap hands and what have you not. But when I opened up my own school of kickboxing, I had to excel on that for economics because I couldn't afford to pay a cutman, though there weren't that many cutmen in the area, but I knew that they were important. So I used to look at these old boxing guys on how to wrap hands, and, I would practice wrapping my own hands. And, I don't know if you guys can see it, but I have a scar. I don't know if you can see it right there. It's not big. I have a scar about this big right here. I would wrap my own hands at work or at home. I'd get on the bag and, I'd find the tension, too tight, too loose, whatever not. Well, I'm at home one time and I'm cutting them off, and my skin just kind of turns, and I cut about this much off of just the skin, and kind of freaked out a little bit because I'm home by myself. So I run to the refrigerator, and I'm thinking I'm a cut man. I get my medication, and I applied it. So got a little scar there that is a reminder that, you got to sacrifice. But, yeah, that's when I took it more serious is, when I started traveling the world with the kickboxers, and I became not only a good trainer, but also a A-level cut man. And at that point, I figured, you know what, I want to go to Vegas and go where boxing's at. It's the boxing capital of the world. 26 years ago, I made the move, and here I am.
That's awesome. Somebody's asking, Stitch, and I'm glad somebody's asking this question because I've been harassing you since the last time I had you up here.
What is it, Nick?
Will you have any Cutman seminars in Canada anytime? And honorable mention, Stitch's favorite Canadian Italian agent has been on him since the last time he was here.
Yeah. No, you did. I'll tell you what, you've asked me 3, 4, 5 times. I know, but let me say the time that I was over there, man, I had such a great time with you guys. It was fun going to the restaurants, people stopping us and taking pictures. And I just had a good time with you guys, Nick. And yeah, I would love to. I love doing seminars. And in fact, I just got invited yesterday to go do one in Brazil, but it's my time frame,
Yeah.
A lot of times I'm at the point now because I'm working MMA, I'm working boxing, I'm working the bare knuckle fights, and I'm doing movies, so a lot of times 3 weekends out of the month, I'm somewhere. And it's tough to give a commitment to do a seminar with so many things going on. But I love doing them. And hopefully we could do it again. My agent. Yeah, Nick is my agent.
Yeah. No, I'm just kidding around. I know you're super busy, but Canada loves Stitch. That's for sure.
My man, I just saw a message. Some good friends from Fairfield, Patty and Will. They saw that the article you put on Facebook, and they tuned in, man. So want to show a lot of love to Will and Patty, man. What's up, guys? All right, go ahead, carry on, bro.
Okay, so another question is, these people. Susan Bailey is saying, thanks so much for your time. You have a lot of experience, told some great stories. Is there any other epic, interesting, or cool stories inside or outside the ring about a fighter or a fight team that come to your mind?
Oh, yeah, of course. They don't come to my mind. You got to ask me who. I'll give you a story. But yeah, there's once I get back into my memory bank, there's so many great times and great moments that I've had, Nick, that it's tough just to pick one and say I did this and say I did that. But Fedor, I guess we all know Fedor, right? Fedor Emelianenko.
Yeah.
So, the Emperor, big legend, right? So when Josh Barnett left the UFC, he started fighting for, I think, New Japan Pro Wrestling. And he called me and asked me how much he would charge for me to go to Japan to work fights with him. And I give him my fees, and I started working with Josh. But when I would get to Japan, all these other guys would want me to wrap their hands. And Josh would say, you know what, man, I'm paying to bring Stitch over here. If you want him to wrap your hands, you got to pay him $500, right? So I'd make $2-3 grand in a night just wrapping these guys' hands, right? And but Fedor Emelianenko had just come back from breaking his hand, and I think he was going to fight Mark Hunt, if I'm not mistaken. And this is at the Saitama Arena. And the promoter comes and asks me, and he says, would you be interested in wrapping Fedor's hands? And of course, who wouldn't want to, be wrapping his hands? So I walk in the dressing room, and I've worked with enough Russians to know that they're more on the quiet side. So I'm wrapping Fedor's hands and trying to talk to him, and he's saying, man of few words. So finally I finished wrapping both his hands, and I ask him how they feel, and Fedor goes, yes, super. Man, Nick, I walked out of that dressing room. I don't think my feet were even touching the ground. But what made that night nice is he ended up winning the fight. And Josh and I and the team were walking down the hallway back to the bus, and he sees us, and he invites us in to this dressing room, and, Plasiba, thank you. We drink vodka. We had shots of vodka with Fedor Emelianenko. So, every time we fought, I always wrapped his hands after that. But the last time that I worked with him in Bellator, I drive into the hotel, and I'm walking into the lobby, and he's sitting out in the lobby with all his team and all that, and he gets up, and he comes and gives me a hug, which is, very rare do they do that, right? But he says, I got you some sweats. And I said, Fedor, really? So he sends a guy up to his room, and he brought back some sweats, and he put my name on them. If you give me a second, hold on. Let's see, where's Fedor? Sorry, I want to break it, man. So these were the Fedor outfits, right? But let me show you. How much of a classic guy he was. He puts my name on it. Let's see, where's Stitch at? Hold on, guys. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, see, look at that. He puts Stitch on the front, and then he puts Stitch on the back. And these are the Team Fedor outfits. So yeah, that's one of my great stories with one of the many guys that I've worked with. Hold on, let me put this away. So not bad, huh? Pretty badass.
Yeah, that's amazing, and just that you had that relationship with Fedor. I was actually hoping that you would get to that story tonight, because that was definitely after.
Yeah. And you know what makes that special? Just like Forrest Griffin, even like Chuck Liddell. Every time he fought, him and his coach John would call me and thank me. But with Fedor, for him to have thought about me while he was in Russia, making these outfits, that goes beyond me just working with him in the dressing room. To me, I thought that was very respectful. And the same thing with Brock Lesnar. When I wrapped Brock's hands, I was telling him how I liked this T-shirt. And he says, well, I have one for you. I said, no kidding. He says, yeah. He goes, when I was packing, I said, when my wife was packing, she says, do I get a shirt for Stitch? And he said, yeah. So after I finished wrapping his hands, he goes in his bag, he gets his bag and gives me the shirt, and I thought that was pretty special.
That's amazing.
It's amazing, is right.
Patty says, hey, Jacob, Will and Patty say hey from Fairfield, California.
Yeah.
And, we'll probably finish with, this question, Stitch. Just don't want to take up much more of your time, but
sure.
What's your favorite combat sport to practice or watch?
That's not even a fair question. I love them all, man. But it used to be nice to get back in the bag and kick the bag and just get a little bit of workouts now. And now that we're on this lockdown, I guess maybe I just continue to do a little bit of stretching and this and that. But I'll tell you what, the sports I'm glad I'm not involved in is MMA and bare knuckle fights, man. Because I tell these guys, I'm glad I'm too old, man. Because what you guys are doing with this MMA, the game has progressed so much, Nick, from when I first started working with the UFC, and I knew nothing about MMA. I knew nothing about wrestling, and not that I'm a big, astute, knowledgeable guy on that, because I'm not. But I see these guys. You guys are getting better and better and better, and the students that you have, see where they're going to be at 3, 4, 5 years from now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great answer. Well, Stitch, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate the friendship and the time you always give me. I know you're super busy guy, and you know, I'm super grateful for you coming on here tonight, and you know, hanging out with everyone during this tough time, you know, and sharing some of your war stories with us. So just on behalf of everybody, I just want to say thank you so much for your time, and I'll be in touch, brother, because when the lockdown's over, I'll be bugging you again, bring you back
All right.
to Canada.
I got to make it a point, man, to scratch a weekend away so I could hang out with you guys, man.
Yeah, RG. I still talk to RG every single week, and I told him
Tell him and Otis. Yeah, tell him and Otis. I said hi, man. It's the good people, and I tell you, I had a blast, man, when I was up there. And it's like, say, it's not about the. Of course, it's a business, right, Nick? But it's not about the money. It's always about friendship, and like say, and I want you guys to know, you know, when Nick called me up, you know, he asked if I would do it and how much I would charge, and you know, these type of things like this, it's not about money. It's about friendship and about giving back, and hopefully, you know, if some of you guys learned, you know, through some of the answers that I gave you, through some of the great questions you guys had, then I think that's how we get paid back, right, Nick?
That's it, 100%.
My man.
Thanks, brother. Thank you so much for your time, Stitch. And everyone, I hope you enjoyed the time as much as I did. And I can't say, I just can't say thank you enough. It was really special. Thank you, brother.
Anytime. Take care.
All right. Take care, guys. Hope you enjoyed that. Hang out with Stitch.